Marina, great to see you again. We've been going back and forth on nutrition in the first couple episodes we taped, and then we did one on your background growing up in Romania and then moving to Spain and then to Canada. And this one, we're going to go back and talk about nutrition again. And it seems like a reasonable place to start is your observations about the way people eat, like in Romania, Spain, Canada, and how things have changed over the years or in your experience in different places. So maybe we could chat about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to see you again, and really happy to chat about this. It's something that fascinates me, and I know it fascinates you, and hopefully will bring some insights from a European perspective to our viewers. But yeah, it's true, as you mentioned, I had the privilege to move several times, move not only countries, but also continents. And obviously, I noticed that there's a huge difference in the patterns of eating from place to place, and not only from continent to continent, but even moving, let's start at the beginning, moving from Romania to Spain. I definitely noticed there's some difference. And it's true that what I realized is that, first of all, Spaniards used to have dinner really, really late. And when I'm saying really late, it's at 10, 11 in the night. So first I was actually shocked because I was wondering, like, how come can they do that and still they're pretty fit, but they eat at that late hour, and they're not actually really light meals. They're pretty heavy, such as tortilla, which is based on potato, carbs, paella, which is based on rice, carbs again. So that was something that I noticed when I went to Spain. And then I realized that basically the fact that they eat so late is that they actually start really early in the morning, start really late in the morning. So their first breakfast is around 10, 11, or sometimes even later. And also the dinner, when they do the dinner at 10, 11, even if it's during a weekday, they don't go to bed straight away. They keep going, whether they go for walks, whether after they go for a coffee, just because they used to do way more social life than we, even in Europe, in Romania, do. So basically, they have the dinner, let's say at 10, but then they go to bed at 11, so at 12, sorry. So still their digestion has a little bit of time to process there. And also they tend to go for walks after they finish their meal, or sometimes even dancing if it's a Friday night, of course, or a Thursday night. And I think the most important thing is also how they eat. They tend, and we European in general tend to take meals like a privilege, but also a social thing that we like to share with our friends, our family, or gather together. It's a way for us to kind of commemorate, as would be Christmas time. So we literally take our time to chew the meal, to enjoy, to literally think at the taste and at the flavor, and we stay for 1 hour with the same meal and chatting. So again, there's small portion, eating really slowly and enjoying them. So that's something that I realized and might help the Spaniards to keep fit, right, even if they eat at late hours. And when
just pardon interrupt, in a week, how often are you eating out with other people? I mean, if you're mostly eating at home after work, how do you bring that into the everyday meal?
Yeah, to be honest, actually in Spain they have the literally the custom to go not every single day out, but I would say maybe on a week of 7 days they go 3 or 4 times a day out. But also the food that they eat, it's nothing like junk food. Yes, it's full of carbs, but it's made from scratch, because Spaniards in general love to cook. And also when they go out for a meal, the restaurants, they provide food that it takes a lot of time to elaborate. So it's not something quick prepacked that they just wrap the salad and they just put it in a bowl with some chicken wings that it's fried and fast. They take their time to prepare, even if you go to a restaurant. So they do this, they go out 3 or 4 times a week. But again, they take their time, they enjoy, they chat with friends. So it's a way of socializing rather than eating just to eat. It's more a way of socializing.
Interesting. You know, the things changed in the US. When I was a kid, we went out to dinner maybe once a month. And I think that was the norm. There weren't many restaurants. People ate at home. It was expensive. Things have changed. And of course, in Houston, people go out almost every night. I remember my recollection is, and other cities vary from place to place, and family to family, culture to culture. But yeah, you have a lot of these faster food restaurants, even the sit down restaurants. People are in and out of there fairly quickly, I think.
Yes, and just to circle back really quickly to your question, if I would be here in Canada, I wouldn't go out every single day, first of all, because I would probably leave my paycheck in 1 week. But in Spain, they do have the concept of tapas, which is small share kind of a share food, a bit of toast with a bit of cheese, with a bit of tortilla. So then it's cheaper and it's affordable.
When I lived in Irvington, New York, we had a tapas bar down by the train station. People would get there ahead of the train or get off the train and go there. It was a neat place, and you have your little drink, and the tapas thing, fits on top, as I recall.
Yes, that's right, and that's what they do in Spain. But yeah, I think it's really affordable. And when I moved back to Canada, I saw another difference, which is, first of all, and you just mentioned, but I would like to circle back. People are eating so fast here. And yes, it's true that they have dinners at 5, 6 p.m., just because also I noticed they start really early in the morning, like 6, 7 a.m. in the morning. Like I remember back in Calgary, my uncle started at 5 a.m. in the morning. So it's true that they have really early the dinner, and sometimes it's lighter if they cook home, but if they go out, it's whatever that might be. Yeah, I think to be honest, and I know it kind of sounds funny because not everybody can afford, of course, and I will go to other methods as well and what worked for me and what not. But one of them is actually traveling and see what's around the world, and see how people are eating. When I travel to a country, I love to look and visit the museum and understand the culture. But for me, culture is not just museum and check out the parks that they have. It's also how they food, how they eat, how they drink, when they go to sleep, and all those things. I think that's really important. And then, but of course, as mentioned before, that's not affordable to everybody. I think one of the most keys is also to read, try to listen to podcasts, try to listen to doctors, try to listen to different people's opinions, and see what's best for you and what works best for you. And also be mindful that you should try. And if you try, there's no problem if it's not successful. You can try another thing and see what works for your body. But I always say, and I think I said that, and I really want to stress this enough. It's really important also to check your blood and do some blood tests before you start and try a new diet that you think would work for you, just because it's very dangerous not to go on the other side of things. But try, listen, educate yourself. Nowadays, there are more rules, and also I noticed that on the packages you can see exactly what type of ingredients. So do a little bit more research, and even if it takes more time, just read the labels of what you're buying. So at least you know a little bit, even if you're not a doctor or a nutrition and you don't know exactly if a corn syrup it's actually sugar or what it is. Just see. And as a basic rule, less ingredients, healthier and better. That's what I learned the hard way.
Yeah, I remember buying some butter croissants at some store, and butter was in it, but it was like the 14th ingredient, had all these oils and other sorts of things in it before the small amount of butter. So we have competing narratives about the source of the problem. The group, Nina Teicholz, Gary Taubes, and others start by sort of blaming. First, they say that, we didn't, in America, from the founding until 1980, we didn't have much obesity. And then suddenly it goes up like a rocket. And they argue that it's because the federal government changed the nutritional guidelines, told people to stop eating saturated fat. But saturated fat in meat and eggs is what satiates people. Whole milk, you get full quicker. So people were hungrier because they didn't get as much fat. They ate more carbs. And he argues that's a big part of why people got fat right at that time. Critics of that say, no, that's not true. It's because the fast food industry started and the service industry where people are sitting and not as active, watching television more. So you get, and in schools, they don't have, a lot of schools here don't have recess anymore. The kids are inside all day long. So the changing patterns of, so you and maybe that's part of everything, but you've got different narratives. Some are blaming the food industry for changing the kinds of food they served. Others are blaming the government for these mandates in nutrition schools, but it's part of, you get all this divergent information, but there ought to be a way to track down the sort of salient issue, which is the weight gain came suddenly, at least in the US.
Yeah, and I actually have an answer for you here. And I think, first of all, it's a combination of factors. We're more used, and especially nowadays, and I noticed, and I was reading a lot of articles, how people gain a lot of weight, especially during pandemic, when everything turned to digital. To be honest, it's pretty sad. And I noticed that I really like and I smile when I go skating on Sundays and I see parents with kids and I'm actually looking at them. And I talked last Sunday with one of the parents and I said, I just want to smile and tell you, you're doing a great job, because rather than having your kid going on a PlayStation, you actually go out and make him and incentivize him and motivate him to be active. Yeah. So yes, I think it's a very it's a complex subject. It's a lot of factors, but it's obviously that we're going into a more comfortable society. So that does not help.
Yeah, you have different traditions people have, but again, the weight gain began decades ago, and the argument that the medical argument is the increased carbohydrates for a lot of people, not for all, lead to insulin resistance, to poor metabolic health. I'm just reading this book from 1963, Nutrition in a Nutshell, by Roger Williams, who's a PhD researcher at University of Texas. And he just says in the very beginning of it, he's teaching people about nutrition. And his subtitle is "The Proof of the Pudding is in the Eating and in the Subsequent Metabolic Effect." So the question is, when you eat, what effect does it have on your metabolism? And that, of course, now involves the microbiome. But if people eat like sugar and it's over the amount, the glycemic load is too high, they've got this cascade of issues, and then they're famished again in an hour or less because they didn't eat. These guys say the healthy fat or the protein, they ate carbs, and the carbs are just swept out of their system and stuffed into the fat cells. So again, that's the narrative, that side.
And I would like to add here a little bit, and probably we go a little bit into a ramp of like low carbs. And I would like to know how an American, because obviously, and I actually want to stress, what's the European opinion of low carbs? How would you define low carbs or high carbs? Because for European, I don't think we ever think what a low carb diet is. We actually try to eat as much as we can because that's our culture, a Mediterranean diet, which actually it's fat and protein mostly. And we enjoy the flavor. Recently, I shared with you an article how people, and I was very curious how Italians are so slim by eating so much carbs. And one of the reasons was, first of all, quantity. It's always, yes, you eat carbs, but depends the quality of the carbs you eat. For example, they make their pasta from scratch, which is very different than just buying pasta at Costco, just to put a name out there, which is so processed. So first of all, it's the quality of carbs. And secondly, it's also how much you eat and enjoy the flavor, and don't mix the flavors. That's what Italians don't do. They don't mix the flavors, which I think it's really important. So
that was a very thoughtful article. I'll put a link to it because at first I was reluctant to read it because there's so many articles like that are starting off bashing low carb or keto or this or that. but it was really more saying, here's what she observed, here's her experience. And it was humble in the sense that she didn't claim to be an expert. She just said, this is what's different there. Yeah, it was very good.
Exactly, and that's what we're trying to do here as well. And I'm trying to say this is bad or good. The only thing I'm observing as an immigrant, as a traveler, I observe differences, and I observe also how people and the rate of obesity is. So I think that for me, what struck me in North America compared to Europe, it's the variety of carbs you can find. If you go to a supermarket in Spain, you can find a bag of chips, but it's hidden away. It's a small one. You can barely see. And if you ask somebody, hey, do you have some chips? They will kind of look like you and like, yeah, that would be the answer. Yeah. But if you come here, it's like, oh yeah, they're everywhere. So, and also the culture of snacks. We don't have the culture of snacks in Europe. That doesn't exist. We do have our meals. We take our time. We have the breakfast, like how Spaniards would do at 10, 11 a.m., which is a bit of carbs, a bit of protein, a bit of fat, and that will keep them full up until 2 p.m. Right. And then up until dinner. So that culture of the snacks, which again, in general, tends to be carb, it's not there. So I think it's also how you define the carbs, how you define a low carb diet.
It's like today, there's these battles in US schools about the vending machines in the schools and what, want healthy things. Well, of course, when I was in school, there were no vending machines. You got there and at lunchtime, you either brought your lunch or you had lunch in the cafeteria, but you didn't have snacks, through the day. It was crazy. Looking at it in the complaint again here is the federal government and the federal nutrition guidelines push through against the advice of leading nutrition people, by the way. It was Ansel Keys, sort of one guy and his team that pushed this through. They told people you've got to eat more carbs. You've got to cut down the fat in your diet, and you particularly reduce saturated fat. So they were pushing these vegetable oils, seed oils, as well as much more carbs. So when I look at a website on this, I'll put the link on there. It's a very low carbohydrate diet is less than 10% or 20 to 50 grams. So that's a very low carb. Low carbohydrate is less than 26% or less than what says 130 grams. And of course, it depends on your body weight in terms of the actual grams. And then moderate carbohydrate is 26 to 44%. The high carbohydrate diet is 45% or more. Now, the U.S. nutritional guidelines say get most of your energy from carbs. So over 50% is what they're promoting. And Gary Taub says his sub theme is like, not everybody can eat everything. So that works for young people, muscular people, athletes, because the carbs, if you're eating them and you're burning them off, and you're jogging, you're exercising more, and I'm walking a lot. But for people that are eating all these carbs, their body can't handle it because it's turned to sugar, right? Metabolized quickly. The glycemic load, anything over 3 teaspoons, gets swept out by insulin. So you get a glucose spike, then an insulin spike, and then the insulin is pushing these carbs or sugar glucose into your fat cells. People should try and find the strongest advocates on both sides and sort through the ideas. But, the proof is in the pudding. People by the thousands are losing weight, going off their medications, going off insulin for diabetics and obese people, under doctor's supervision. And it turns out that before, when they were advocating just exercise more, eat less, and take this drug or that drug, nothing happened for most. But when they said, look, just reduce the amount of carbohydrates and increase the amount of protein and healthy fat, these people did what I did. I lost 20 pounds in 1 month and another 20 pounds over the next 6 months. And I wasn't, suffering or working hard. I just stopped eating carbs or cut way back.
Yes, and you're correct. And I just want to add 2 more things here. Actually 3. For the one who don't know, I actually read a lot about it, and it seems to be true, pretty scary, but true. All those carbs that you find in cheap cereals that you think they're healthy, but they're not quite, they do have some ingredients that they actually can affect your brain and makes you crave more and want more, so you can buy more. So then,
yeah, these hyper palatable foods, the anti-food company business say, yeah, they've got all these scientists trying to figure out what's irresistible, and they're making those foods for people. So yeah, and that's what they do. They don't want to hurt people, but they want to sell their product.
Exactly. And second thing I wanted to say is that you're right. Most of they always say 80% it's diet, and my dietitian also talks about it, and 20% is sports. This doesn't mean you don't have to be active. No, don't get me wrong, but you have to make sure that you have a balanced diet, And again, if we're talking about low carbs, of course, if a normal diet in a day for a person would be cereal with milk, then for breakfast, then for lunch would be some burgers, and then for dinner would be some fries, I would say, oh my God, yes, go for low carbs. But for us as Europeans, because that's a little bit my European perspective, and as a traveler, breakfast would be scrambled egg with tuna, and maybe from time to time a slice of bread, just to have a little bit of energy.
Yep.
Then for lunch would be a gazpacho, which is actually a tomato soup, very traditional in Spain. And then for dinner, for me, I would not do like Spaniards. I eat very early. My dinner finishes around 6 p.m. Would be salad with chicken, or with some turkey, or whatever that might be, with options for vegetarian and vegans, of course. So I wouldn't call this a low high diet in carbs, but of course I will have my slice of bread from time to time. And also because it depends, as you mentioned, from person to person. Women can be affected more maybe in terms of hormones when it comes to cut definitely the carbs. Men not so much. I'm not a doctor, I'm not an expert, I don't know. I know what it worked for me and what it did not. And definitely I will have my fruits, that's for sure, for my digestive system. So
yeah, and fruits, there's different fruits. A pineapple is like super sugary and much sweeter than it was 20 years ago. These new ultra sweet ones, apples are sweeter. So different berries are supposed to be highly recommended, a lot of the nutrients in there. We were going to talk just a little bit about vitamin D too, vitamin D as well. There's so many different variables, the microbiome, what's in there, but the vitamin D is a hormone that turns out to be hugely important. And in my sort of unrelenting criticism of federal government guidelines, the US is still recommending 600 IU. England, UK recommends 400. And yet the research seems 5,000 to 10,000, is better. And what's that about? I don't know.
I actually really want to talk about this. I have an example with myself. So I'll put it out there. I do suffer from thyroid, and vitamin D is really important for me, for everybody, but especially for people who suffer from thyroid. You will notice me, I'm always craving for fish, for nuts, for sardines, which are actually packed with vitamin D. And the reason I'm craving for that is just because I miss that having the thyroid problem. But to make the long story short, I actually went to see a naturopath, and they always give you some blood tests. And one of the first blood tests I had to do was the vitamin D, which of course I was low. Nevertheless, I'm living in Vancouver, which is really rainy. So I had to take vitamin D. My family doctor gave me 1,000 in the summer and 2,000 in winter, and the naturopath gave me 5,000.
Yeah.
I kept with 5,000, but of course, after 6 months, you have to repeat the test. And I have to let you know that I was really scared. I actually got intoxicated with vitamin D for 5,000. Too much. And my family doctor actually called me, and she asked me, are you okay? Please go to the hospital if you start trembling. So be mindful for all of you who are there. Just make sure that you test from time to time, and don't go so much with what the dose is supposed to be. Just go with your gut feeling, and please do that, because I was literally intoxicated with 5,000 per day.
And during that time, you were eating the sardines, the nuts, all the things with the natural vitamin D in it as well. So you had, and you're a smaller, I'm guessing you weigh less than I do, right? So your body is handling less, and the systems that use it and so forth. Plus, I don't know what your body fat level is. You don't have to tell our audience, but that fat absorbs vitamin D. A lot of it sits in those fat cells. So
Yes.
if I was at 30% body fat when I first started before I lost weight, that's a lot of places for the vitamin D to go to. So you've got all these different variables, and the blood test seems to be the best to do. But that's interesting because I've seen posts where people say you get too much vitamin D, but I've never talked to a real person. And now I have.
That's why I said I have an example, and that's on me. And my gut feeling for the audience and the viewers is just if you take those vitamins, please make sure you test yourself, because it might work for you, maybe 5,000, but for other person might not. And also depends a lot on what you eat. If you're not a person who does not eat so much fish or sardines, which are packed of vitamin D, then maybe 5,000 would work for you.
Yeah.
But again, be mindful, because I had that terrible experience. Luckily, I didn't have any side effects. I was okay, but you can actually get dizziness. So be mindful and watch for those symptoms.
But I've read too, I mean, I spent the spring and summer and early fall sitting out in the sun. First off, I figured I'd save money. I didn't have to take a supplement if I got sunshine. Plus, I got a tan. That was sort of cool. I hadn't done that since I was a teenager. But they had said you get like 25,000 IUs of vitamin D just by 20, 30 minutes in the sun when it's a strong sun. So your body somehow can handle that. But I guess it's the constant over push of vitamin D that can be difficult.
Yes, and also my doctor was mentioning that even if there's, let's say, in winter or fall, it's a day full of sunshine. How the position of the sun it's moving during winter and fall, it's not the same like summer. So you don't actually get the same amount, even if you're staying in the summer 30 minutes. The power of the sun, it's not the same in summer as it would be the 30 minutes in fall or winter. That's why I always, and my family doctor always increases me from summer of 1,000 vitamin D to 2,000 during fall and winter. But even if you don't have that privilege, be mindful of the symptoms. See how you feel. See if you feel, in general, the lack of vitamin D. And I'm not a doctor, but I experienced on the first person. It's feeling sluggish, feeling tired, more tired than normal, feeling dizzy, and with a lot of headaches. So be mindful of those symptoms and go to pharmacy and ask and see what they can provide you and what feedback.
You can go ownyourlabs.com. You can order your lab tests and get whatever tests you want, because here you can only get certain tests. The doctor decides which tests are going to be appropriate. You need an insulin test, but they'll only give you fasting glucose, but that doesn't tell you if you've got pre-diabetes or things like that. At least those are the things I read. Well, okay. So we've covered ground and talked about a number of different issues. I'll try and do a post with this that outlines some of these numbers and the competing narratives. And it's interesting when we talk about food, the most popular TV shows in the US now are cooking shows. There's must be 50 reality shows, cooking shows, cable shows, and getting people to look for careers in cooking. So it's a much bigger thing than it used to be. And I think the people younger than me spend a lot more time with cooking and skills like that than I ever did. But I don't really know the latest numbers, but still people are too heavy and they're struggling. So hopefully we can solve that in our next discussion.